In recent years, governments have been telling their citizens that the threats to their freedoms come from faraway countries that many probably couldn't even find on a map. In truth, these threats to freedom are domestic. Now, while everyone has been distracted by what's going on overseas, almost every major central bank has been slowly rolling out CBDCs. If they succeed, they will take away more freedom than any foreign force. That's why today we're going to bring you up to speed on CBDC developments around the world, tell you which countries are the closest to creating a digital dystopia, and look at what you can do to stop them. Stay tuned. Let's start with a quick recap. Central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, are, well, digital currencies that are created by a central bank. Now, for context, most digital currencies that exist today were technically created by commercial banks. The only form of central bank money we currently use is physical cash. If you watched our recent digital euro update, you'll know that the primary reason why central banks are so obsessed with CBDCs is because they're terrified that commercial banks will have total control of digital currency once cash use disappears, or rather, once it's phased out to maximize profits. Of course, central banks' solution to this problem is to develop, quote, digital cash that they can control. You see, with physical cash, you have total anonymity and total control over your transactions. With CBDCs, however, you would have neither of these things. Don't take my word for it, though. European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde admitted last spring on video that the digital euro would be used for control. Now, obviously, this was a PR disaster, and the ECB has been trying to save face ever since then, promising privacy and all the rest. Nobody believes them, though. It doesn't help that central banks have been very sneaky about their wording. For example, when they say that CBDCs will preserve privacy, what they actually mean is that commercial banks won't be able to see your transactions, but the central bank will. This has been explicitly stated in a few CBDC reports. And on that note, it's important to be aware that there are technically two types of CBDC. Wholesale CBDCs, which will be used by select individuals and institutions, that is, the elites, and retail CBDCs, which will be used by everyone else, that is, us. Naturally, it's the retail CBDCs that have the most terrifying attributes. The silver lining is that many central banks seem to be turning their focus away from retail CBDCs and towards wholesale CBDCs. If you watched our recent video about the BRICS currency, you'll know it's possible that this is because central banks want to join the BRICS new wholesale CBDC payment system. This makes perfect sense when you consider the fact that retail CBDC adoption has been incredibly low. Take Nigeria, for instance. The initial adoption of its e-Naira CBDC was only 0.5%. It subsequently rose to 6% adoption, but this required cracking down on cash, which created serious social unrest. And even with those restrictions, it was still just 6%. It seems that other central banks notice this and are starting to realize that it's better to focus on a wholesale CBDC, particularly because it will help them bypass the need for the US dollar in international trade and bring them closer to the BRICS countries. But this hasn't stopped some central banks from rolling out their retail CBDCs, and it's safe to assume that the central banks focusing on wholesale CBDCs today will switch their focus to retail CBDCs tomorrow. This is why it's paramount to know what central banks are planning and how to prepare. And by the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, then be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel and ping that notification bell so you don't miss our next CBDC update. Apologies for the interruption, folks, but if you're looking to get the very best information about altcoins and become part of the most welcoming community in crypto, then we have just the place for you. The Coin Bureau Club is where you can find our unrivaled altcoin reviews. Every week we cover a different low-cap altcoin project, and these reviews are the best in the business. No one digs as deep as we do into these projects, and we share all the info we find with our members. There's tons more besides our reviews, though. You'll also get access to our exclusive research feed, where I and other key Coin Bureau team members share alpha, our thoughts on the market, and more in real time. You'll get to see what we all hold in our portfolios, and there's an exclusive members Discord as well. This is the place where you can chat directly with us, ask questions, and meet fellow crypto enthusiasts. The community there is the best you will find in the crypto space. Everyone is welcome, and you can talk crypto 24/7 if you so desire. There are loads of other benefits to being a Coin Bureau Club member too, so if you're interested, check out the link in the description below. And now, back to the video. Okay, so with that background under our belts, we can take a closer look at CBDC developments around the world, starting with North America. Not surprisingly, CBDCs have become a political issue in the United States, with many Democrat politicians supporting their implementation and many Republicans rejecting it outright. These latter include Donald Trump. He promised to prevent CBDCs from being rolled out in the US if elected president, something that he was apparently advised to do by his close ally, Vivek Ramaswamy. And it goes without saying that RFK Jr. has also been anti-CBDC, and he is now backing Trump, in case you missed the news. Anyway, when it comes to politics, actions speak louder than words. Thankfully, Republicans have taken action to ban CBDCs, most notably with the bipartisan CBDC bill passed by the House back in May. Republican politicians in Louisiana also passed a law banning CBDCs and protecting crypto in June. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve has done its best to stay impartial about the creation of a digital dollar, but it's had its fair share of slip-ups. These include a paper published in February which claimed that the US dollar could lose dominance to other CBDCs and stablecoins without a digital dollar. This is presumably why Fed Chairman Jerome Powell was interrogated by Republican politicians about the central bank's digital dollar plans during a hearing in March. As always, Jerome said that it's ultimately up to Congress to approve a digital dollar, and it would be a long way away if it was approved. What Jerome didn't say was that the Fed's FedNow fast payment system, which launched last summer, could evolve to become a CBDC system, and its creators seem to see that goal as the endgame. More about FedNow in the description. But back to that claim about the US dollar losing global dominance because of stablecoins. Those of you who are familiar with stablecoins will know this couldn't be further from the truth. The fact that USD stablecoins are backed by US government debt actually means they would boost the USD's dominance. This is something that Republican politicians are starting to realize, and it seems to be the main reason why they're supporting crypto. The catch is that stablecoins technically aren't that different from CBDCs. Stablecoins come with the same controls. They're just issued by private entities instead of public ones. This is an uncomfortable truth that the crypto industry doesn't like to talk about, and it seems to suggest there's a hidden agenda behind the pro-crypto push we're seeing in the US and elsewhere. When you realize that stablecoins are at the center of crypto policy, it foreshadows the same future as CBDCs. But we'll come back to all that later. Now, south of North America, we have, South America, which has surprisingly limited CBDC developments since the start of the year, at least relative to other regions. The biggest announcement seems to have come from Venezuela, which phased out its Petrocoin CBDC after 6 years. For reference, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro ordered the creation of the Petrocoin in 2017 as a means of bypassing US sanctions. In theory, it was supposed to be backed by the country's rich oil reserves. In practice, that didn't mean much, as the government controlled its supply and issuance. Take note. At the same time, the Bahamas is reportedly looking to force commercial banks to adopt its sand dollar CBDC, which it launched back in 2020. As a fun fact, the Bahamas sand dollar was technically the first CBDC to launch, and, like Nigeria's e-Naira, it has seen limited adoption, less than 1% to be exact. Given that the Bahamas has a population of around 400,000, that's basically a handful of ice cream vendors and a dude selling dream catchers actually using it. And as a not-so-fun fact, forcing commercial banks to support CBDCs is something that every central bank seems to be planning. You'll recall that FedNow is a precursor to a digital dollar. Well, it looks like the Fed wants to force every commercial bank to integrate FedNow at some unspecified point in the future. And yes, by the way, we know that the Bahamas is in the Caribbean. We just figured we'd lump it in with South America to keep things simple. Now, speaking of which, across the pond from South America, we have Africa and the Middle East, and there have been a lot of CBDC developments in these regions. The most notable example here is, of course, Nigeria, which is wrestling with the rollout of its e-naira to the point that it's considering creating a stablecoin instead. Unfortunately, though, it seems that the e-naira continues to be a focus for Nigeria's central bank. What's even more unfortunate is that even if a Nigerian stablecoin is rolled out, it would have the same controls as the e-naira. You'll remember, that's because the only real difference between the two is who issues it. More about what's been going on in Nigeria in the description. Moving on. Now, another two countries that have made significant CBDC developments are the UAE and Saudi Arabia. The UAE completed its first transfer on mBridge, the BRICS aforementioned payment system, in January. mBridge then launched in June, with Saudi Arabia signing on as another partner to the project. This makes us wonder whether Turkey will be the next to join mBridge. To bring you up to speed, Turkey has applied to join the BRICS alliance. Turkey has also been working on its digital lira CBDC to try and keep a lid on inflation. If inflation continues falling, though, Turkey could focus on its wholesale implementation. Further south, Israel is reportedly looking to roll out an interest-bearing retail CBDC. This is interesting, pun intended, because many central banks have opted not to allow retail CBDCs to earn interest. This is simply because it could risk sucking money out of the rest of the financial system, causing instability. The caveat is that these central banks are in countries with lots of debt, which makes the financial system vulnerable. In Israel's case, its debt-to-GDP ratio is just 60%, which likely makes its financial system much more robust. However, it seems Israel won't launch its retail CBDC even when it's ready. According to a recent Reuters report, Israel is waiting for another Western nation to roll out its CBDC before the rollout of its own digital shekel. It's not entirely clear why, but it is fascinating. What is clear, though, is that Israel believes the ECB will be the first Western central bank to roll out a CBDC. Yikes. Oddly enough, it seems that Iran is in the same boat, as it recently completed a pilot for its upcoming digital rial. There's no question that Iran is also looking to circumvent US sanctions with its CBDC. All we're wondering is what the country will do once it's succeeded. Anyhow, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the ZiG, Zimbabwe's gold-backed digital currency. Funnily enough, the ZiG was turned into a physical currency back in April. By June, there were entire black markets of illegal forex trading with the ZiG. Well, at least it's held its value and even gained against the USD. Now, next door to Africa and the Middle East, we have Asia and Oceania, whose CBDC developments could easily justify a separate video. The big one here is, of course, China, which has been aggressively rolling out its digital yuan CBDC. In December, it completed a cross-border gold trade using this CBDC. And if you think that's crazy, consider that Kazakhstan paid for a rail link to China using its own CBDC, not China's CBDC, Kazakhstan's CBDC, the digital tenge. For those unaware, lots of smaller countries are focused on CBDCs as they're essentially the only way they can protect their national currencies. But back to China. Another crazy eCNY development happened last November, and that was the news that British bank Standard Chartered will participate in China's CBDC trials. To refresh your memory, French bank BNP Paribas joined China's CBDC trials last year, foreshadowing geopolitical changes. In other words, Europe possibly breaking ranks with the US and aligning more with the BRICS, but probably not anytime soon. Speaking of which, China's CBDC rollout gives us a sense of what it's going to be like in the EU once the ECB rolls out its digital euro. As with all totalitarian revolutions, the first people to be affected will be those who supported the initiative. China is reportedly investigating the creator of its digital yuan as of April. The next people to be affected will be us plebs, who will refuse to use the CBDC even when forced to adopt it. Chinese workers being paid in digital yuan are exchanging it for actual money as quickly as they can. A similar thing happened with digital currencies in Scandinavia at the start of the pandemic. The more you know. Now, the final group of people to be affected by a CBDC rollout will be criminals, who will be allowed to operate so long as they're part of whichever elite is in power. Chinese courts recently sentenced a gang for money laundering using digital yuan. You're kidding yourself if you think they're the only ones. Now, another Asian country that needs to be mentioned here is India, which has been even more aggressive with the rollout of its CBDC than China has. Whereas Chinese citizens have been hesitant to adopt the digital yuan, it seems that Indian citizens are relatively comfortable with the digital rupee. That's because over 5 million Indians are using the digital rupee thanks to multiple pilots spanning back to 2022. Not surprisingly, the Indian central bank has recently been turning its focus to cross-border CBDC solutions as well as offline CBDC payments, which are needed given India's large rural population. What is surprising, though, is that crypto exchange Bybit added support for India's digital rupee in July. Besides the fact that India is hostile to crypto and crypto itself is inherently opposed to CBDCs, this is surprising because it suggests that there's enough digital rupee adoption to add it as a payment option. Say, did you know that the Coin Bureau Deals page has trading fee discounts of up to 70% and sign-up bonuses of up to $100,000 on the best crypto exchanges? If you didn't, check it out now. These deals are only available to our viewers and they won't be around for long. Link is in the description. Now, this leaves two major regions, and that's the UK and the EU, both of whom have been pressing ahead with their CBDC plans despite opposition from the general population. Let's start with the EU, where the ECB claims that the digital euro will have better privacy than the digital currencies currently issued by commercial banks, as if that mattered to anyone. Ironically enough, the commercial banks in question raised multiple objections to the digital euro just a few days later. Coincidentally, a similar scuffle was happening in the UK, where over 50,000 people provided feedback to the Bank of England about its digital pound plans. Can you guess what the number one complaint was? That's right, privacy. Fortunately, a digital pound requires approval by UK politicians. This could be why the Bank of England has turned its focus to wholesale CBDCs in recent months. Chances are that it's got word of the digital yuan experiments being run by commercial banks. And chances are that the BOE isn't enthralled by the prospect of British banks adopting a foreign CBDC. By contrast, the ECB doesn't seem to care. That's because in June, French bank Banque de France partnered with Hong Kong's monetary authority to work on CBDCs. FYI, Hong Kong is effectively part of China. On the flip side, the German central bank is working on CBDCs with MIT, the famous US university. All this underscores the possibility that we're going to see some significant geopolitical changes in the coming years. But it's possible these divisions were always there. It looks like there's a tug of war between governments and central banks, who want CBDCs, and asset managers and commercial banks, who want stablecoins. This brings me to the big question, and that's what you can do about the rollout of CBDCs around the world. Now, to put things into perspective, 94% of central banks are working on a CBDC of some kind, and you'll recall that central banks will probably roll out both kinds regardless of which one they start with. The bigger problem, however, is that asset managers and commercial banks are simultaneously rolling out stablecoins too. What this means is that it looks like we're guaranteed to get some kind of dystopian digital currency system. It's just a question of who will be in control, governments or corporations. It looks like the answer is going to be a mix of both. That's because some countries, such as Indonesia, have been explicit about their intentions of using CBDCs as a tool to combat stablecoins and crypto more generally. Other countries, such as Switzerland, seem to be comfortable with stablecoins. The bigger question, however, is how much control these governments and corporations plan on implementing, and how we can navigate this complex digital currency landscape. In theory, CBDCs could be superior to stablecoins for preserving freedom. In practice, however, this depends on the governance. If a CBDC's controls are determined by democratic vote via a democratic government, then this would be a double-edged sword. On one hand, most people would probably elect a government that minimizes CBDC controls. On the other hand, though, they would probably vote for the one that prints the most. Believe it or not, but this is a concern that the Bank for International Settlements, or BIS, has raised in some of its CBDC reports. To bring you up to speed, the BIS is the Bank for Central Banks. And the BIS believes that most people would vote to print CBDCs to give to themselves if allowed to. And it's probably right. Conversely, if a stablecoin's controls are determined primarily by private institutions, then they will do whatever is required to maximize adoption and value. In theory, this would result in minimal controls. In practice, though, controls could be imposed to protect the solvency of the stablecoin issuer itself. In case you forgot, stablecoins are backed by government debt. This means that when you buy a stablecoin, government debt is bought behind the scenes and vice versa. If confidence in a stablecoin collapses, then it would result in lots of government debt sales and lots of volatility. In turn, this could risk crashing the financial system because government debt is often used as the collateral for large loans, particularly US government debt. Come to think of it, it's possible that the next financial crisis will be caused by a stablecoin issuer going under because of some external shock. And it's possible that this external shock could be due to the exponentially rising government debts, especially in the US. If this trend continues, bond investors could dump, causing bond prices to fall and leading to questions about whether stablecoins are fully backed due to the drop in collateral value. In turn, that would lead to a run on stablecoins, increasing bond market volatility further and turning stablecoins into the perfect scapegoat that could be used to justify the rollout of CBDCs by governments. But that's a topic for another time. But although we do happen to have a video about it, link in the description. Now, as to what you can do to push back against CBDCs, the most effective measure will be to actively vote against politicians who are in favour of rolling them out, though in many cases that may leave you short of options. The fact that it's becoming a major political issue in the US does suggest, though, that more politicians will come forward to oppose them. You can also look for opportunities to submit feedback to central banks themselves, as happened in the UK, and you can take steps to try and use physical cash more often, as phasing it out is a major part of the CBDC rollout process. If we don't use it, we'll lose it. Sadly, all these measures may not be enough in many cases to prevent CBDCs from being foisted upon us, in which case the best we can do then is follow the example of the populations of places like Nigeria and the Bahamas and not use them. It's very much a last line of defense, but it may be the most effective one we have. And that is all for today's video. If you found it informative, smash that like button to let us know and subscribe to the channel and ping that notification bell to stay informed about CBDCs and digital currencies more broadly. Be sure to share this video as well if you want to help inform others about this topic. With all that said, thank you as always for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Guy, over and out.